Powering Change, sponsored by Kansas City, Kansas Community College.
A small town filled with big ambitions.
We're a small town community, but we definitely embrace change.
This is Soto, Kansas, a town of around 6,000 people.
So it's not going to be a 6,500 person town for very long.
Home of Panasonic's new electric vehicle battery plant, a 3-year-long project now becoming a reality.
This is the biggest project that we've ever seen.
As more of the facility comes online, we have been talking and listening to the voices of people who live in this area. All of us have been trying to help keep you informed.
Because it's not quite a regular deal.
As part of our Powering Change series, we're listening to your voices. We're highlighting the major employment opportunities, sharing the history of the site, and holding our leaders accountable. It's all to ensure that the surrounding communities get the benefits they were promised. Hello, and thanks for joining us as we take a look back at how we got here and what's ahead for Panasonic in DeSoto. I'm Olivia Akery, and I'm covering changes in the city of DeSoto and around the new facility.
I mean, there are so many changes and so much ahead. Just thinking back a year ago to now and all the development happening in and around here. I'm Melissa Jackson. I am holding our governments accountable as progress is being made.
And with that progress continuing, I'm looking into how this could impact your cost of living. I'm Elise Schoenig, and I've been focusing on the impacts that could be coming with that. And we begin by looking at how DeSoto is preparing for Panasonic with its workforce and the increased traffic it's expected to bring. The development of Panasonic in DeSoto has brought funding for local schools, more business downtown, and also traffic.
Traffic, without a doubt. There's a lot more people coming and going.
Thousands of workers travel K10 and DeSoto roads to get to the plant each day, an unwelcome side effect for some neighbors like Charles Miller.
The truck traffic is out by me, which makes it a little more difficult because we're just country roads.
Mayor Rick Walker has heard these concerns.
Largely the concerns that I've heard most often probably have to do with traffic or concerns about what traffic might be like.
The city and KDOT have already expanded what were once country roads by the plant.
We've got 3 interchanges where we've had improvements, and then our road improvements between the interchanges to the Panasonic or the Astra Enterprise Park so that those workers can efficiently get in and out.
Morning commutes can be busy, like this backup near the K10 and Lexington Avenue interchange. Mayor Walker knows the afternoon challenges too.
We've got 3,500 construction workers there leaving at 4:30 on a afternoon, and it does create a bit of a backup for 20 minutes or a half hour.
Local road improvements near Panasonic wrapped up last year. Now KDOT is planning a K10 capacity improvement project stretching from Lenexa to DeSoto. Mayor Walker hopes that employee shift work at the plant will reduce the traffic they're seeing now, and says K10 changes are something to watch for in the future.
We're studying 83rd Street from Lenexa DeSoto city limit to K10, and we'll look to implement a project to improve the safety and capacity of that road in and out of DeSoto, in the upcoming years.
Let's check in with my colleague Elise Schoenig, who's talking to residents, businesses, and city leaders on the housing situation in DeSoto.
Change is brewing in DeSoto. It brought Alex Waller and his wife here.
So it's not going to be a 6,500 person town for very long.
The Wallers live near their business, Force of Nature Brewing, downtown.
I think it's a net positive as a resident. It's just there's some growing pains as they're building the big plant and infrastructure out there.
Sherelle Witt is a resident realtor and owner of Oasis Nutrition in DeSoto.
We need more homes, we need more people, we need more people to be able to buy into the community and be a part of the community.
DeSoto officials estimate 2,300 housing units right now. The city is considering approval of up to 2,500 more units.
To be in this community, you're going to need both. You can't just be able to come in and buy a home. Some people need to be able to have that affordability of the rent and then transition into a home.
Tim Holverson is with the local Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Council.
As you have more rooftops, as you have more people, that gets you on the radar for more, retail and commercial opportunities.
Local leaders are prepared to keep growing with what Panasonic brings. Waller hopes to hold on to DeSoto's charm.
I feel like the change is a net positive for the city.
A delicate balance with change on tap. Let's head over to Alyssa Jackson now. She'll explain how Panasonic is planning to invest back into DeSoto.
All it took was the city foregoing $70 million in property taxes over the next 2 decades to get $248 million in infrastructure upgrades. Tacking on an additional property tax called a special assessment tax to Panasonic is helping build a new fire station and eyeshot of the facility.
We knew that we were going to have increased risk within the fire district, and we had to do a lot of hypotheticals on that risk. What would it take for coverage?
A new fire station could have been years down the road without more than $9 million from Panasonic.
This building has served its purpose, but it's also tired. It's an 80-year-old building. It was not intended to be built as a fire station.
With so much growth in the city, public safety has to grow with it. Calls in the Northwest Consolidated Fire District are up 5% in the past 6 months, and they've had more overlapping calls. Those are active calls happening in the same district at the same time. And they'll be getting a new fire truck, 6 more EMTs, and a new deputy chief with funding from Panasonic. Law enforcement wasn't left out.
We've been involved with the DeSoto community for several decades now.
The Johnson County Sheriff's Office was able to add another deputy to cover the city with the investment.
We have kind of adapted from initially almost a rural law enforcement and small town law enforcement mentality into a larger role with a greater presence.
None of this is one and done. Panasonic already made an initial $800,000 payment to the Community Improvement District in 2024. Every year for the next 20 years, their contributions will help fund fire and police services.
For the most part, folks know that they, as the taxpayers, as community members, they know it's time to evolve.
There's no price tag on safety, but it sure helps when it's paid in full. Let's bring it back to Olivia Acree, who gives some insight into the child care situation in DeSoto and Johnson County.
Not unlike the rest of DeSoto, Happy Campers is an 88-child Montessori school planning for thousands of new people at Panasonic.
We reached out to them to say, how many employees do you guys think you have? Do you guys have an idea as to who has childcare, where the need for childcare is?
The need skyrocketed after the closure of a previous daycare. Happy Campers started nearby in Shawnee, and Program Director Christina Rose says they were called to help.
We knew that families were really struggling, so that was the only center in the DeSoto area. So families really had to disperse out to Eudora, Lawrence, Lenexa.
They opened in DeSoto last summer with help from the state. Look forward.
With Panasonic coming and opening up, we knew there was going to be a great need for childcare. We worked with the Women's Business Center and worked with the state of Kansas to get some funding that we needed to open up our second location.
The struggles aren't just with limited availability, but also with many manufacturing jobs where employees don't work typical hours.
One of the biggest things that we found is there's a lot of 10-hour, 12-hour shifts.
Happy Campers will work with those schedules, but they only have so many spots available.
We're trying to fulfill and save some spots and make sure that we can accommodate that, while at the same time we don't want to deny spots for families and for the local community that needs them.
The problem isn't specific to DeSoto. A February point-in-time survey from the state says that availability only meets 55% of potential child care demand in Johnson County. Happy Campers expects to be full by fall, but hope to expand soon.
We know that we're probably going to have to double our capacity intake or our availability in probably the next 6 months.
Olivia Acree, KSHB 41 News.
Creating tools for success.
It takes money to make money, but I drive a very hard bargain.
How government tax incentives influenced Panasonic's investment into the DeSoto facility. There was definitely no lack of investment into Panasonic. This is a multi-billion-dollar, roughly 5 million square foot facility. It's expected to be the largest battery factory in the world. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly has praised this being the largest development project in the state's 161-year history. I'm examining all of the deals that made this possible. DeSoto is a small town of just over 6,000 people.
This is the biggest project that we've ever seen as a city.
The city will waive some of Panasonic's future property taxes, and that's because Panasonic is fronting the money for development projects like new roads and some critical infrastructure. It's called tax increment financing, or TIF.
Through the TIF, or that whole process, what we're foregoing over the 20 years is roughly $40 million in property tax. At the end of the initial construction, we're going to have $248 million worth of infrastructure that's brought to us all at one time and complete.
And because of Panasonic moving in, DeSoto's mayor, Rick Walker, said property taxes for everyone else will drop by a third.
Quality of life enhancements, the ability to provide projects and provide all those while maintaining a low property tax burden on the citizens of DeSoto.
Panasonic must employ at least 2,500 full-time positions for the local incentives. There's also $829 million in state tax incentives on the table. That's based on the company's investments and hired workers. The state expects at least 4,000 planned jobs.
Because it's not quite a regular deal.
Greg Leroy researches tax incentive deals for the nonprofit Good Jobs First. He says local governments usually take on the most risk in these deals, and at the state level, they overspend. His analysis shows that Panasonic could yield as much as $6.8 billion from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act.
Individual battery plants will be getting more than $1 billion per year per factory from the federal government for several years early in their production cycles. That one kind of incentive alone is going to pay for the factories and could pay for the payroll.
Remember, with a big project comes big binding commitments for all involved.
Uncle Sam is already paying these companies a great deal of money, paying the company for every battery they take off the loading dock.
Let's focus on the Kansas investment made possible by legislation named Apex. For months, taxpayers didn't know what it was for.
I know there was a lot of discussion about the secrecy, but that's just the way that it works. You have to sign these non-disclosure agreements in order to be able to have open and honest conversations and to be able to wheel and deal and negotiate.
Apex helped land Panasonic as long as the company held up their end of the deal. Accountability. What does that look like for Panasonic to make sure that they are fulfilling their obligations to receive those incentives?
Unlike some other very large projects where the money was, sort of up-fronted, we don't do that. Panasonic has got to produce before any of that money goes out.
I requested the incentive agreement through the Kansas Open Records Act. The agreement outlines full-time jobs expected, the investment Panasonic must make, and a commitment to operating in the facility for 15 years.
I want to be a good steward, and so we make sure we put in a lot of guardrails to protect Kansas and the taxpayers.
Governor Kelly points to legally binding repayment penalties if the company decides to relocate, and realizes this huge incentive package means there are high expectations. So much taxpayer money is invested into this project.
Well, I do know that we have invested a lot, but, in economic development, that's what it takes. It takes money to make money. But I drive a very hard bargain.
To you, what does success look like for Panasonic in Kansas?
Property tax values, revenues from income taxes that will be generated by all these new jobs that will be in the area. It really truly will transform that entire corridor. For them to say yes to Kansas, I think gives license to a lot of people to say yes to Kansas. And so I think that's why it is one of my proudest moments.
Alyssa Jackson, KSHB 41 News.
Investing in the future.
Once they have that baseline knowledge, they can go anywhere and have skills that are applicable to the building they just walked into.
How DeSoto is setting up for success as Panasonic prepares to open its doors. The new facility in DeSoto is already creating lots of job opportunities. Panasonic's overall goal is to create around 4,000 jobs, and some area colleges are already beginning to teach the skill sets needed for these jobs. Let's give you a look at what you need to know if you're interested in a job here. The Panasonic plant in DeSoto, Kansas is months away from opening and they're hiring.
If anybody's looking, or you got any friends, let them know.
The questions that you've been asking are all about jobs. So I reached out to them and they told me all you've got to do is apply through a portal on their website and just make sure you filter DeSoto, Kansas in your search. Starting pay range we know is $20 to $30 an hour. And the benefits include a retirement savings plan, health insurance, paid time off, and more. In some of the research that I've done on this story, I found that Panasonic is actually relying on local community colleges to do the training for some of these jobs.
We began developing a program to train their skilled workforce.
Coming this spring, the college will launch an 8-week apprenticeship training program. They're almost teaching the Panasonic employees to be teachers and students.
The technology isn't just for the end user, it's happening in the factories, in the way that we're building things.
We're continuing to tell you stories on Panasonic and DeSoto, whose impact is spanning across colleges in the Kansas City area. But if you take a look at students in this field, they're already powering change of their own.
They all should be ready. Just go and to the one that you programmed and get them running.
This is what a typical day in the lab looks and sounds like for students like Grant Johnson.
And it'll sort and organize and load boxes on a pallet, all automatically.
Grant is part of KCK Community College's Advanced Manufacturing Program. They call it FAME. He was already working at Amstead Rail before deciding to go back to school.
I feel like there's a lot higher of a ceiling of, my opportunities and room for growth now.
I think now other people are realizing, what's happening in Kansas City.
Program coordinator and instructor Chuck Saunders says Panasonic is the new kid on the block here. KCK Community College has been training some of Panasonic's employees since August. Saunders says this is just the beginning.
Once it gets rolling, it's gonna pick up speed and be hard to stop.
The college is also teaching its current students to learn the ropes for potential future careers at Panasonic, Garmin, and other big local names.
And once they have that baseline knowledge, they can go anywhere and have skills that are applicable to the building they just walked into.
Lily Navarez splits her week between learning in the classroom and her manufacturing job at Catalent in Kansas City.
I apply everything that I learn here, there, and vice versa.
And before Grant enrolled here?
Oh, no. I didn't know anything.
Which is why he knows, Panasonic or not.
Be thrown anywhere, basically, and succeed.
They're forging their own paths inside these walls. In KCK, Elise Schoenig, KSHB 41 News.
What's old is new again.
This is world history that's being affected by people who are working and living in Johnson County.
How the past is providing a blueprint for the community of DeSoto ahead of Panasonic's new EV battery plant opening. As Panasonic prepares to open its new EV battery plant, it's impossible to overlook the land where it's being built. What's now Panasonic was once the Sunflower Army ammunition plant, which during World War II was the largest smokeless ammunition plant in the country. Now we're taking a look back at the past to understand why this connection runs so deep for so many in DeSoto.
Welcome to your first day working at the Sunflower Army ammunition plant.
From the 1940s to the 90s, the Sunflower Army ammunition plant brought thousands of workers to DeSoto every day.
They built a 2,500-acre smokeless powder plant for ammunition for World War II.
Andrew R. Gustafson from the Johnson County Museum says the U.S. Army chose DeSoto for good reason.
Sabotage would be very difficult as well, being in such a rural, isolated location. And then the terrain really played into it as well. And Kansas City, I think, was important too. It was really near rail lines that would go across the country.
In its prime, the plant employed 12,000 workers. Many of them were women.
There was a real home front war effort going on. So women were working in industry, they were working agricultural jobs, filling positions that had come up for the war effort, and also filling in where men had left to go overseas and fight.
The plant also set the county up for future growth. Keep in mind, Joco's population when the plant opened was only 33,000 people.
Over the next 20 years, through the 1960s, another 110,000 people move in.
Longtime Johnson County residents, including County Chairman Mike Kelly, know the plant by its water towers.
My dad would point to the Sunflower Army Ammunition Plant because he actually worked here in the summertime when he was going to K-State.
This is world history that's being affected by people who are working and living in Johnson County.
Sunflower's history was not lost on this land, as the site promises to change the future.
I'm going to be able to point south on K-10 and tell the story of the team that came together to build Panasonic and what's come from that and how that's really set Johnson County up for its future.
Thanks for joining us for this in-depth look at what's to come for Panasonic and DeSoto.
And you can keep following our coverage. If you scan that QR code, you can see all of our stories and submit us some story ideas.
And we hope to hear from you, so thanks for tuning in.
Powering Change, sponsored by Kansas City, Kansas Community College.